Hey everybody, this is Lynn. I'm actually filming from bed tonight. I'm hanging out by myself tonight, and my dog Max keeps barking his head off like crazy. So he wouldn't shut up until I went to bed. And now he's all happy. Let me show you. He's all curled up there. I got my other dog, Gracie, right there. Hope you can see her. So I'm filming from bed. Um, but anyways, I wanted to just spend some time. I know I've gone a little bit into some detail about some of the issues I had from my past. I did a video on my exercise phobia, um, but I haven't really spent a whole lot of time talking about just kind of like the history of my weight gain because I was not overweight as a child or as a teenager. Now, as a teenager, I thought I was overweight. Um, but I wasn't. I went on my first diet when I was 14, and I'm not I was pretty tall. I was at that I'm 5'8" now. Then I was about 5'7". I was maybe even 5'8" at that point, and, I weighed about 160 pounds. I was about a size 10, maybe, and but all my I hit puberty early, and, I was a little bit bigger bone than my friends, and I had all of these, like, size 0, size 3 friends, and I think the I think maybe I had one size 5 friend, but I thought I was fat, and looking back, I was just normal. I had just developed early, and so I had curves, and my friends really didn't have a whole lot of curves at that point. But I was an insecure 14-year-old, so I went on my first diet. I lost about 20 pounds, and, I was pretty thin. In fact, I was so thin that my dad told me he was worried about me because I was getting too thin. I just don't have the bone structure to weigh a lot less than that, to be honest. Um, but so I stopped the diet. Just, my dad expressing concern meant something to me. I didn't want to be unhealthy, and I was pretty much fine for the rest of my high school years into, early adulthood. And I started gaining weight. I mean, in college, yeah, we gained a little bit of weight, but I was pretty active my first couple of years of college. And then my junior year is when I really started gaining weight. I started to gain the weight when I started to develop the symptoms of polycystic ovarian syndrome. Um, so that was the first time I, you know, gained maybe 25 pounds. And my first couple of years of college, I had gotten to about 175 pounds. I gained maybe 10. But then my junior year, I gained like another 25 pounds. So I was about 200, which I was not happy with. And by the time I got married, a couple of, after I was about 20, I was 22 when I got married. So I was pretty young. But I had lost a little bit of weight, got down to about like 190 pounds. And I was still pretty healthy. Um, I started putting on some weight after I had a really, really bad ankle sprain. And the swelling in my ankle took like 2 years to go down, which was interesting because now that I know I have mast cell activation syndrome, I'm wondering if that was one of the reasons why it took so long for the swelling to go down. But anyways, so I got married at 22, and I was still pretty healthy, not too overweight, definitely not morbidly obese. I was just maybe a little bit on the overweight side. Um, and my husband and I started fertility treatments. And over the course of quite a few years of doing fertility treatments, I really started picking up weight. And by the time I was 28, I was about 250 pounds. And I remember specifically that um, age because I went to my 10-year high school reunion. And I specifically recall one of my old friends from high school who I hadn't seen since high school. When I walked, when well, I got to the reunion first, but when she walked in, I went over, happy to see her, of course. And I remember she just looked me up and down and goes, "Wow, you've changed." That really made an impression upon me. I haven't gone to any other reunions since then. It's like I was mortified. It's like, "Wow, you haven't seen me in 10 years and that's the first thing you say?" Of course, she was still really fit. And so that was really embarrassing. But the fertility treatments um were hard. They were really hard on my body. And I had finished college. I was actually working as a teacher for a while. Even though my goal wasn't to be a teacher. But anyways, I did a little bit of work as a teacher, which I enjoyed when I was teaching science, and then I went to another school and was teaching math, which I absolutely hated. I ended up quitting that job. Um, but anyways, my husband and I did 4 times we did artificial insemination. We didn't have insurance for in vitro, but it kept failing. And I just couldn't do it anymore. So it was just too emotional. So we decided to adopt. And I wanted to get healthy and I had been on a diet and my weight had picked up then, let's see. It had picked up to maybe 270, 275, maybe even more than that, um, over the course of, looking into adoption and finishing up the fertility treatments, being unhappy with my job. I had started in my 20s, I'd started dealing with panic attacks. A lot of really severe anxiety. In fact, when I was teaching, sometimes I would have to step out of the classroom because I was having a panic attack. Um, and I never got help for it. Um, I didn't grow up in an era with a family that really understood mental health. So I didn't even think to get help for it for many years. So I dealt for probably about 8 years with anxiety, severe anxiety and panic attacks. Um, But I decided I remember I went on a zone diet and I lost about 70 pounds right before we adopted our son. And so we went through the Fos-adopt program and we got our kids through the Fos-adopt program. So they were a little bit older when we got them. Our son was 4. He came first. And I was so excited to be a mom. And it was weird to suddenly be a mom of a 4-year-old that had been in and out of different foster homes but he just bonded and he just attached to me and I was just so excited and he was like a fifth appendage for the first year. Um, but I know that as I turned my attention to him, I started gaining weight again. And so I think I was about 31 when we adopted him. But, a couple years later, we adopted our daughter. She was 5.5 when we got her. She was very, very, turns out she'd really been abused in foster care, had been in a lot of homes. And she was really difficult, just an angry, angry child. And she's amazing now. But then it was a real challenge, especially the first year with her. Um, and I had still been dealing with the anxiety. And um, I ended up I think I was 32. Or 32 or 33. I ended up having a complete breakdown. Went into a psychiatric hospital. I actually took myself, went into a psychiatric hospital. They admitted me because I just was convinced I was going to die. And um, I just like, it was like a full collapse. And so when I came back home, I couldn't do anything for myself. Like anxiety just saps the life out of you. And so it took me a while to recover. I spent a lot of time just being really sedentary, picking up more weight, picking up more weight. I'm trying to think, how much did I weigh when after that phase? It seemed like at some point I broke that 300 point mark. And I don't really remember specifically when that was, but I don't know if it was when I was in my 30s or my 40s, but I know that for quite a long time, I had hit a set point of 275 pounds. And it seemed like that was just how much I was going to weigh. And no matter what I did, 275 was my weight. And it stayed that way for years. So it may have been in my 40s that I eventually like broke into 300 pounds. Um, but as far as eating goes, I've talked about the physical challenges and the mental challenges I've had, but I haven't really talked about like how did I eat? And when I was on the zone diet, I ate a very balanced, it was a very balanced diet. I did a lot of weighing and measuring, and for me that's just not sustainable. I can't keep that up. Especially when you deal with anxiety and depression. Um, there's a lot of, and with my condition, which I know I have now as of last year with my diagnosis for Mast Cell Activation Syndrome, I've always had very, very low energy. And I know now it's because of that condition, but I didn't know that back then. I I knew that I lacked a lot of energy, and I thought, well, it must be just be depression, but I didn't think I was depressed. Um, I mean, I felt happy. I loved my kids. I loved my family, and you know, I don't know. So, anyways, we so so when I was on the zone diet, I ate pretty well, but over the course of the years, with me gaining weight, of course, I was eating tons of carbs, and I had a problem with sugar. Of course, I remember when I was in college and I was in my early 20s. I think I'd already gotten married at that time. And the first time I did a binge, like a binge eating, it wasn't like a binge and purge type thing, but for me, it was a binge. It wasn't so much of a binge like some people do, where but for me, it was a chocolate binge. I remember I went to the store and there was, I knew it was bad because I did it all secretly. I went to the store and I bought chocolate candy bars and I bought chocolate cookies. I don't know, maybe Oreos. I don't remember. Um, but I bought a whole bunch of chocolate things and then I remember I drove back to I think it was in between classes. I drove back to the school and I parked and I just gorged myself on the chocolate. I don't remember whether I ate it all or not, but I remember I ate it until I was disgustingly, like I was starting to feel sick. Um, and I recall over the course of maybe a year or so doing that twice. Um, I don't know what I'm assuming, looking back, it was probably hormones. I don't know because I'd never done anything like that before in my life. And I did it twice, and that was it. With chocolate. I had, over the course of the years, I had a major sweet tooth. And sometimes it was ice cream, I think, was probably one of my worst problems, was eating too much ice cream. You know, and then I would get, like my husband and I would get in an argument or something, and I'd go out and I would go through a drive-through and like I'd go through McDonald's and I'd get like two cheeseburgers and a McFlurry. or I'd go through Dairy Queen and I'd get chicken tenders in a blizzard. Or I'd go through Burger King and I'd get a Whopper and a milkshake. There was always some ice cream. And, you know, my husband and I went through a tough time with our marriage when our kids were in their teens. They were really challenging and it caused a lot of tension in the household. And so I was doing that a lot. I was going out and and I'd sit in the parking lot and I'd eat the food. And it wasn't like a gorging quantity of food, but it was frequent. Um, or we'd bring home ice cream. I could eat a half a gallon of ice cream if I was upset. It was always very emotional. And I mean, I ate vegetables and I ate fruit and I ate meat. And when I wasn't eating sweets, I know I snacked a lot. So I felt like I was always looking for an energy source. Um, and I didn't necessarily realize, like, this is before I got diagnosed with Mast Cell Activation Syndrome. So it seemed like no matter what I did, I didn't have any energy and I was always tired. Now I do have sleep apnea, but I sleep with a CPAP machine. And I just go see the doctor regularly to make sure that the CPAP machine is working, and it is. And so I remember when I got diagnosed with sleep apnea, this was in 2008. I remember they told me, "Oh yeah, you're gonna feel great, and you're probably gonna lose weight." No, didn't happen. Didn't happen. Um, I felt a little bit better, like I wasn't hitting a wall of fatigue 15 minutes after I would wake up, but I was still tired all the time. I was still lacking energy, didn't lose any weight, kept gaining. So, but over the years, whenever I was eating, I was always looking for an energy source because I was tired and I didn't have time to be sleeping all the time, and sleeping didn't seem to help. Um, so I guess those are the two reasons: emotional eating and looking for energy was why I would be snacking. And I was always choosing the wrong types of foods. It's hard because, like, when you don't have energy, you don't cook. You're looking for something easy to grab and just eat and have a quick source of energy. And that's exactly what I did. And so over the years, the weight just kept creeping up and creeping up and creeping up. And I was getting more and more, sedentary. And I remember I was working, I became a nurse when I was in my early 40s, 40. And so I was working in hospitals, and I remember I was starting to gain a lot of weight. I was like bumping into patient equipment, which is not good. And I was a very good nurse, but I couldn't be bumping into patient equipment because that's no good. And it didn't happen very much, but I was starting to notice it as I was gaining weight. And then I ended up getting injured. I ended up having a back injury and a wrist injury, and which put me out for a year. And then I ended up going into outpatient nursing because I just knew that something was going to happen again. I was just too big, too deconditioned. Um, and so it didn't make sense for me to go back into hospital nursing, even though I loved the patients and I worked in like a step down unit from the ICU. And so we had, pretty sick patients. There was, a 3-to-1 nurse patient ratio in the unit that I worked in, as opposed to the ICU where it's like a 1-to-2 nurse patient ratio. So we had 3 patients, and, they were not quite sick enough to be in the ICU, but almost a lot of the time. We were trying to keep them out of the ICU. And so, anyways, it was very fast paced. And I remember my last hospital job that I worked at, one of the other nurses, I kind of got to be a little bit kind of friends with her. Not really, because there was something weird about her that I later learned that she had a food addiction, but, she was always trying to fix me. She was always trying to get me to lose weight or help me, wanted to be my coach to lose weight, and, um, I remember one time I'd been there for about a year, and she came up to me and she said, "You know, you've been working here for a year. You're just as busy as the rest of us, but I noticed you don't lose any weight." And I thought, "That's a weird thing to come up to tell somebody." I mean, it was true, but it was just such a weird thing to say. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, she thought she could fix me, and I told her, "Well, I've got polycystic ovarian syndrome, which you tend to wanna gain weight with PCOS." Um, I was still eating wrong, but, anyways, I'm glad that I didn't take advice from somebody who had a food addiction. She she was, I don't think she was I think she had a history maybe of anorexia, I'm not sure, but, um anyways, I just kept gaining weight, and so it was good that I was no longer working in the hospital, but I was doing outpatient nursing. I was working in gastroenterology, hepatology, ended up loving it, and, but there was definitely a lot more sitting. I was doing a lot of phone work, phone triage of patients, assessing patients over the phone. We did some nurse visits, but, overall, it was definitely a lot of sitting, and so, the emotional eating continued over the years, and, I ended up also getting diagnosed last year with Mast Cell Activation Syndrome and, hereditary alpha tryptophanemia. Both of those explain why I don't have energy, um, and I ended up going on medical leave in June of 2022 after a really severe MCAS flare, and that has put a lot of weight on me. I had tried the carnivore diet back in, um, I think October of 2021, and it was working beautifully. So why did I stop? I don't know. Um, but anyways, I had gotten down to about 290. I started dieting. I started actually did keto for a while because I got up to like 347 was about my highest, and I got down to about 190. And then I stopped keto and I gained weight again, not all the way back, but maybe about 320. And then I did the carnivore diet and I think I got back down to about 190. Um, and then we all got the big C virus you got the Delta version of it back in 2020, November of 2021. My daughter brought it home and she got it. And a day later, my husband got it. And the day later, I got it. And, I had been preparing for it. I knew that, being obese, that I had risk factors that made me more susceptible to it. So I had been taking a whole bunch of stuff. And so I ended up doing beautifully. Now, this was coming off of the carnivore diet. So I had been basically, fat adapted. I was probably in ketosis. I was not eating sugar. And I had been also making sure I got my vitamin D levels up and I was doing all the right things. Um, and I did beautifully. Now, just as a side note, I didn't take the um, so I was dealing with just my own immune system and I did beautifully. I was really surprised and I took care of my daughter and I took care of my husband and I had great energy through the whole thing. And in fact, it was weird because, and for me, it stayed in my nose. And I I had swabbed with betadine and I did like a betadine throat gargle, which I had read a study that said that that's like super effective for keeping you from having severe illness, and I was doing other things, but I think that doing that early on, um, definitely helped. It just like I said, it just stayed in my nose. My energy was really good. And so, it was weird too because after and I was actually I didn't I think I'd only laid down, like, one time, and I think I maybe had a really low grade fever for about an hour, and I slept for about an hour, and then I woke up and it was gone, and that was it. And then, after a few days, I had this incredible energy. It was really weird. I've never heard of anybody who had it and then had great energy afterwards, but nothing is normal for me. I don't know why I had such great energy afterwards, but I did. Unbelievable. I felt like I could run a marathon. Um, but I didn't like when I was quote unquote sick. Um, I wasn't really focused on how I was eating because I was focused on taking care of my daughter and my husband. And they didn't do all of the precautionary things that I did, and they had it worse than I did. So I needed to focus on them. And so I didn't go back. Like I was probably I know I was eating soup and stuff, and but I was allowing myself to eat carbs again. And of course, with the virus, you lose weight. So I like lost all this weight, and I'm like, yes, all right. Of course, that kind of weight is going to come back. So but I didn't go back on carnivore. And my original intent with doing the carnivore was just for it to be a trial. I hadn't thought far enough ahead to actually, just realize that it was something that you need to do. It needs to be a lifestyle because otherwise the weight's just going to come back. Like, why stop doing it? I, I don't, I didn't understand. I don't really, looking back, I don't understand what my thinking was, but I went back to eating the standard American diet and, gained weight back, gained most of the weight back. So when I started this carnivore diet, I started at 339 pounds. So, I had almost gotten back up to my maximum, not quite. I was about 9 pounds away from my maximum weight. And, I wasn't eating like a half gallon of ice cream, but I would eat like a pint of ice cream. And I wasn't really going out very much like I had been before. But I was still eating things I shouldn't be eating. And, um, I got just so it just kind of dawned on me that I started having back problems from being on medical leave and just being so sedentary. Like I had zero energy with this MCAS flare, and I ended up having back problems from being so sedentary and knee problems. And I felt like all I did was limp around all the time. And I figured I've got to do something. I've got to lose weight or I'm going to end up being a cripple. And that was the motivation for me, just that I could see, for some reason, suddenly I could see my future. And I didn't want to end up a cripple. And that was the motivation for me. And so I just cold turkey decided to do carnivore again. And this time I decided it's not going to be a trial. I'm just going to do it. Period. Because something has to change. The way I've been eating is not working. I can't be doing emotional eating. I can't be having cravings. I got to do something um, that's going to be workable for me. And find carnivore to be easier than keto. And because I've done keto and I was successful on keto, but I found that with keto, because you're allowed to have some carbs, there was that little like carb creep that happened. Like I'd be getting more carbs and then a little more carbs and then a little more carbs. And it's really easy in your mind to justify having a little more. And for me, that just doesn't work. And so carnivore is actually pretty simple for me because there's no carbs and I can handle that. It's like as long I know what I need to eat, and there's no thinking that goes into it. And I think that's helpful for me because um, I don't do well, with my mass activation syndrome. It affected my brain. It affected every all over my body, but it also affected my brain, my ability to process, and still sometimes, I will have trouble finding my words. Um, my speech will be slower. Like I have to think more to get my word, what I want to say. And even in this video that I'm doing now, I have to think and for the words that I'm trying to say. Hopefully, it's not too distracting. But anyways, for me, having to think through meal planning just was not an option. Um, so I know I've left out stuff. I mean, there's a lot of things that have gone into me gaining weight, but I think I hit the high points because I don't want this video to be too long. I've had a lot of stressors in my life that I have not talked about. But if you can imagine, adopting special needs kids that were in foster care, that would get moved around from home to home, that it turns out both had been abused in foster care, that both ended up with PTSD. Um, we've had some crazy challenges, crazy challenges. And for me, eating was my comfort. So we got through those challenges, but it was years and years of dealing with kids that were not coping properly, and trying to get them in therapy and keep them alive. Like seriously, keep them from offing themselves. It was really stressful. So, I didn't really go into that much detail about that, but there were a lot of factors, and my husband didn't always cope well. I didn't cope well. Um, who's equipped to handle that type of situation with your kids? You can have that happen with your biological kids. It's not just adopted kids, but when you're in that situation, you just do the best you can with what you've got. And that's what we did. But for me, my coping has always been food. And I know that I'm a sugar addict. I have no doubt. And I'm so happy that with this carnivore diet, I don't have any sugar cravings. I don't have carb cravings. And so far, I'm doing well. So, anyways, I'm going to stop there. I know this is a long video, but I wanted to at least spend a little bit of time talking about how I got to be the weight I am. And hopefully, I'll have a story later on about how I got all the way back off. I hope so. But, anyways, that's it for today. Bye bye.